getting to know our local area pastors. It's time for The Pastor's Perspective on KCIS.
And once again, very special guest in studio, Pastor Barry Crane of North Sound Church in Edmonds, my own pastor. Good morning, Mr. Crane.
Good morning, Mark. Great to be back with you again today.
Good to have you in studio once again. Continuing our discussion of how to be a better neighbor as we've come through some very challenging times the last few months, getting back into the swing of things, and we want to find out how we can treat each other better. We left last week's show, and you can listen to all these shows at kcisradio.com under the morning devotion page. We laid out the story of the Good Samaritan, and we want to kind of get into, well, what is a good neighbor? What does that look like? What are some practical ways that we can be a good neighbor?
That's a great question. And up to this point, Mark, we've talked a lot about the challenge of neighboring. And the problem is that it costs something to be a good neighbor. And so there are challenges, or if you want to call it barriers, to being a good neighbor. So in the parable of the Good Samaritan, the lawyer that asked Jesus the question, who is my neighbor? Jesus responded to him, and he was looking for a loophole, right? He was looking for a way out of what it meant to love his neighbor, because he knew it was going to be messy. And let's face it, it's messy loving our neighbors, because sometimes they're a bit unlovable and sometimes they have needs that are overwhelming. But let's take a quick look at a story of what a good neighbor is. I love this story. Norma Cook, 89 years of age, and Chris Salvatore, 31 years of age, became good friends living across the hall from each other in a West Hollywood apartment. She's 89 and alone. He's 31. And after Cook spent 2 months in the hospital with pneumonia and breathing problems on top of leukemia, the doctor said she couldn't move back home without 24-hour care. And so Salvatore, his 31-year-old friend, did a GoFundMe page and raised $77,000 for care for her, but it ran out before she ran out. And so as a result of that, she was going to have to move into a Medicaid home situation. He didn't want that to happen, and so he invited her to come live with him. And he said this, he said about her passing, which happened just a short time later. He said, the last thing she did was, before passing away in her apartment, she put her arm around my neck. She was so weak, I don't know how she did it, and pulled me in and kissed me and said, I love you. So, Mark, that's a picture of neighboring. Yeah. Now, the barriers are like the challenges of the messiness of getting involved in people's lives. But for Barb and me, one of the biggest challenges has been time. Yeah. So the art of neighboring, we ask people to map out their street and map out the names of their neighbors. We have a fridge magnet that they can use for that purpose so they can pray. But the idea is to move from stranger to acquaintance to a relationship. And that takes time, takes energy. You have to commit yourself to it. And time is one of the great challenges. It's funny, even retired people I've heard say, I don't know how I got everything done before I retired. Right. So we need to address the time. And because there's not more time, then that leads to better management of time in our lives in order to free ourselves up. And part of that is prioritizing what is really important.
Well, we need to make time for what's important in our lives, and Jesus does want us to be good neighbors to those around us. My wife and I did the same thing. We started off by writing a nice little card and giving everybody a little plant and leaving it on their doorstep, and I think we did, 8, 10 people, and we got some response, and those are kind of moving into acquaintances, and we'll see where it goes from there.
That is great.
But it does take some time, can be messy. So far, it's not been messy at all. But I would encourage people to try that. Make sure you know who's living around you even. That's a good place to start in neighboring. Maybe somebody you work with that you don't necessarily agree with. Start by maybe praying for them. That's a great way to start.
That's a great thing.
The Art of Neighboring, a great series, was recently preached at my church, and Barry Crane was bringing that message, and I thought it might be a good message for us here in the Northwest as we come out of this COVID time. We want to get along with people from various positions, and if people want to know more, they can visit our website at kcisradio.com and get these messages. Again, Barry Crame from North Sound Church in Edmonds. Thank you for talking with us
Thanks,
today.
Mark. See you next time.
To get involved with the Pastor's Perspective feature on KCIS, you can call our front desk at 206-546-7350. You can also find out more information and listen to previous perspectives at kcisradio.com.